I stood on the cobblestone walkway outside the Fairbridge Hotel ballroom, fingers curled around the pink-wrapped box I'd spent 3 months saving for. A telescope lightweight but powerful Elara had circled it in a catalog last Christmas, her face lit with wonder. I couldn't afford it then. I could barely afford it now. But today was her 7th birthday, and I had promised myself she'd get something that came from joy, not leftover coupons and guilt. The parking lot was already full. Cars with sleek metallic finishes lined up in a near-perfect row. Inside the glass doors, I could see the shimmer of silver streamers and giant foil balloons spelling out, "Happy Birthday, Elara." Waitstaff in black and white uniforms floated between tables like dancers balancing trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I took a breath and stepped forward. Before I could reach the door, a tall man in a gray suit stepped directly into my path. A badge clipped to his chest read, "Marriott Event Security." He raised a hand, palm flat. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said, voice flat but polite. "Invitation only." I blinked. "Excuse me." He glanced at a clipboard in his hand. "Name Lenora Wills. Elara is my granddaughter." His eyes flicked across the list. "You're not on here, ma'am. I can't let you through without an invitation." For a second, I thought this was some mistake. A mix-up. Then I saw her. Sabine stepping through the ballroom doors like she'd floated out of a fashion ad. Hair glossy and curled dress a designer cut I'd seen once in a Neiman Marcus catalog I never intended to buy from. She saw me, and her smile tightened just enough to sting. "Oh, Lenora," she said, like I was an old acquaintance who had showed up uninvited. "You didn't get the email. We kept things small this year. Just immediate family." I opened my mouth, then closed it again. I looked past her shoulder. 500 guests at least. A balloon arch tall enough to need scaffolding. A string quartet. A cotton candy machine. "Small," I echoed softly. I extended the gift toward the security guard. He looked confused, but took it with both hands. I turned away, pulled out my phone, and scrolled to the name I'd memorized just in case. The line rang twice. "Maribel, it's Lenora. Freeze every account linked to her name. Now." I didn't leave right away. I stood there on the cold pavers my reflection caught in the ballroom's glass wall, distorted by the shimmer of indoor lighting and the bounce house inside that pulsed like a living thing. Elara's name was stitched in gold across the inflated archway, swaying every time a child leapt against the mesh walls. They were all dressed like miniature celebrities, tulle skirts, patent shoes, even a boy in a tiny tuxedo. Not one face looked familiar. My hands hung useless at my sides. The weight of the phone still lingered in my fingers, even though I'd slipped it back into my purse. The gifter telescope was now with a man who didn't know her name or mine. I doubted she'd ever open it. I pressed closer to the glass. There she was. Elara. My Elara. In a lavender dress with butterfly sleeves, hair tied back with silver ribbons. She was laughing, spinning in dizzy circles, while a photographer snapped rapid shots. For a second, I let myself believe she'd look up, that she'd see me, and come running like she used to. Arms open, yelling, "Grandma?" She didn't. I remembered the first time I held her. The nurses had barely handed her to Sabine before she passed her straight to me, still flushed from delivery, whispering that she needed a nap. I stayed 3 weeks in their apartment, cooking meals, changing diapers, letting Sabine sleep while I rocked Elara in the living room and hummed lullabies my mother used to sing. When she was 4 months old and colicky, it was me walking the hallways at night, with her tucked over my shoulder. Sabine said the crying gave her migraines. I remember wiping spit up from my blouse before heading to my part-time job, bleary-eyed but proud. Sabine always said, "Thank you," back then. When Elara turned 2, she started calling me Lolo, before she could say, "Grandma." I didn't correct her. It was ours, that word. Sabine had once joked that I'd bonded with her daughter more than she had. I thought she meant it affectionately. A blast of music jolted me out of the memory. Inside, someone was making a speech on the microphone. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw Sabine near the stagehand, resting lightly on Jasper's arm. My son didn't even glance toward the window. Something inside me, once tender and easily bruised, shifted. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was awake, and I was done being erased. It started small. A favor here, a little help there. Just until we get stable, Sabine had said over the phone during their honeymoon. Their rental car had broken down in Maui, and she sounded panicked. Jasper didn't even get on the line. I'm so embarrassed to ask, she whispered. But we spent everything on the wedding. I wired $500 that same hour. Then it was the apartment deposit. They wanted something safer, closer to Jasper's job. The new place needed furniture. Then came Sabine's lingering student loans, just a few thousand, she said, pressing her hand to her chest like the weight of the debt might kill her. The stress isn't good for fertility, she added softly. I remember how my heart skipped at the mention of a grandchild. I paid off $22,000 over the next 6 months. When Alara was born, I thought things might ease, but motherhood didn't slow Sabine down. The hospital charged us so much, she said, bouncing the baby on her hip. Even with insurance, we're drowning. Another 12 grand vanished from my retirement fund. Daycare costs followed. Just until she's old enough for preschool, Sabine promised. That promise stretched into years. I paid $800 a month for a daycare I never saw, for a child I was rarely allowed to watch. The mortgage on their new house needed a stronger co-signer. Jasper's credit wasn't enough. I signed, of course. It's for Alara, Sabine had said. She needs a backyard. There were always reasons, always emergencies, a burst pipe, a job transition, a medical scare. Sabine would call in tears, sometimes sobbing so hard she couldn't speak at first. We don't know what we'd do without you, she would whisper once she caught her breath. You're the only family who's ever really shown up. It made me feel useful. Wanted, like I still had purpose. Now, 8 years later, I was standing outside a ballroom full of catered guests, and I wasn't even on the list. I had shown up for them in every way that mattered, and they had erased me with the click of a guest filter. I pulled open my car door, sat inside, and gripped the steering wheel with both hands. Something wasn't adding up, and I was finally ready to do the math. It was the handbag that did it. A deep emerald Saint Laurent, distinct, expensive, unmistakable. I saw it slung over Sabine's shoulder in a photo Jasper posted of their weekend trip to Napa. They were standing in front of a vineyard, holding glasses of rosé, grinning like two people who didn't owe anyone a cent. The caption read, "Much needed escape. Alara's with friends. You grateful that bag alone could have covered 2 months of Alara's daycare, or what I'd been told was daycare." Then came the new SUV. Pearl white luxury trim parked in their driveway, like it belonged there. I spotted it when I dropped off a set of baking pans Sabine had once asked to borrow and never returned. She didn't answer the door. A delivery driver did her third in a week, judging by the packages I saw stacked by the porch. Her social media was full of curated perfection art classes, spa visits, exclusive gym memberships. Always polished, always in motion, always funded by something that clearly wasn't her receptionist salary or Jasper's modest nonprofit paycheck. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter, that she had family money or maybe a side hustle. But I knew better. The pieces had stopped fitting a long time ago. I just hadn't wanted to look directly at the gaps. That night, I called Maribel. She and I had worked together back when I still had a full-time job at the local credit union. She'd stayed in banking. I stayed in town. I need to check something. I said, keeping my voice calm. Do you remember if I ever co-signed anything other than the house? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Let me pull up what I can. She called me back the next day. Lenora, she said carefully, you might want to sit down. 3 credit cards, a personal loan, 2 store accounts I'd never heard of, all approved using my name as financial reference, and over $30,000 transferred from my account to one Sabine Caldwell had marked education fund, which Maribel confirmed was a personal checking account with regular spa clothing and travel charges. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I took out a notebook, uncapped a pen, and started making a list. I stared at the list in my notebook, dates, amounts, transaction types. It read like a blueprint for betrayal. And yet, I didn't move. The pen hovered over the page while I sat in my kitchen, surrounded by the quiet hum of a life I had built, with discipline, patience, and just enough grace to survive widowhood without bitterness. Every dollar I'd saved was earned. Every gift I gave came from the marrow of my own modest comfort. And I had given so much, too much. But the truth is, I didn't want to pick up the phone. I didn't want to be the one who blew it all up, because I knew what would happen. If I called the bank, if I froze the accounts, if I drew a line Sabine couldn't cross, then I would lose Jasper. And Ilara, at least for a while. Maybe forever. I wasn't naive. I'd already seen what Sabine was capable of. The gentle digs, the canceled visits, the quiet shifts in tone, the way she smiled through gritted teeth and spoke in polished phrases that always seemed to position me as inconvenient. And I remembered vividly what she'd said one afternoon as I arrived to pick up Ilara. She's better with routine, Lenora. It throws her off when things are unpredictable. Let's scale back the weekday visits, okay, just for her stability. That was 4 months ago. I hadn't had Ilara to myself since. They hadn't just excluded me from a birthday party. They had been erasing me frame by frame like an old photo no longer needed on the shelf. I stood, slowly walked over to the phone, and pressed Maribel's name. When she picked up, I didn't hesitate. Freeze everything tied to her name. Joint referenced anything she's used me for. I want it stopped. Today. Maribel's voice was steady. Done. I hung up and stared at the now blank space on my table where I used to keep a picture of Ilara. I'd tucked it away after Christmas. Couldn't remember why. Then I dialed a second number, the Fairbridge Hotel. A woman named Jessica answered, chipper and professional. Fairbridge Events. How may I help you? I cleared my throat. You're hosting the Caldwell party today? Yes. Yes, that's right. Are you calling about the venue? In a way, I said. I just thought you should know the credit cards they're using to pay for that party are about to be declined. I didn't expect it to happen so fast. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I already had 2 missed calls, both from Jasper's number. I let them go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to hear his voice yet. Not with the gift box still sitting beside me on the passenger seat, unopened, unwanted. I carried it inside like a quiet confession and set it gently on the counter. Then the third call came. This time, it was Sabine. I answered. What did you do? Her voice cracked from the start. High frantic, more rage than panic. They just shut down every single one of our cards. In the middle of the party, with people watching. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? I leaned against the counter, looked out the window, and spoke softly. I stopped paying for the privilege of being invisible. There was a pause. Then louder. You're insane. You've just destroyed everything. No, I said. You did. You just didn't think the lights would ever come on. She hung up before I could finish. I stood in the silence of my kitchen for several minutes before the next call came. Jasper. I answered on the second ring. Mom, what the hell is going on? His tone wasn't frantic like Sabine's, just tired, tense. You know exactly what's going on, I said. I don't. Sabine said. I'm sure she did. Look, he sighed. This is ridiculous. You gave that money willingly. No one forced you. I walked over to the drawer, pulled out the folder I'd started. You think I gave a few thousand, try 87. I have the records. Every wire transfer, every emergency check, every dime she siphoned from my retirement account under the name of helping Alara. He didn't speak right away. I continued, because I thought I was supporting my granddaughter. I was wrong. I was supporting a performance. And now the curtain's down. You could have talked to me first, he said, quieter now. I tried, Jasper. I've been trying for years, but you were always too busy, too trusting, too willing to believe that love looked like silence. He let out a long exhale. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything, I told him. Just listen, because the next part isn't about what I feel. It's about what I can prove. The next morning, I walked into the office of Patricia Rains with a folder thick enough to split at the spine. She didn't blink when I spread out the records across her desk, wire transfers, loan co-signatures, forged references, statements with my name listed as guarantor. She didn't flinch when I said the words financial fraud and identity misuse. She just looked at me calmly and said, "This isn't unusual. Unfortunately, that hurt more than I expected." By the end of the hour, we'd filed the initial paperwork, a formal demand for restitution $87,000 plus interest, and a motion for legal visitation rights. Patricia explained that in our state, grandparents do have standing when a child's well-being is in question. Given the financial manipulation and emotional exclusion, she believed we had a strong case. Word spread fast. Sabine's retaliation came in digital form first. A vague social media post about bitter family members who can't let go, followed by a private message. You're a jealous, controlling old woman. You never liked that Jasper chose me. This is just your revenge. I didn't reply. She went public next. A mass email to the extended family painting me as mentally unstable, accusing me of trying to ruin her marriage. She even claimed I was trying to take Alara from her out of spite. But the bank records didn't lie. Not the red-labeled spreadsheet from Maribel. Not the notarized statements I pulled from the credit union. Not the signed loan documents listing me as ongoing financial support without my knowledge. Jasper showed up 2 days later looking like he hadn't slept. He didn't sit. She says she'll leave, he muttered, eyes darting everywhere but mine. She says she'll take Alara and go back to her mother's. I don't know what to do. I stayed seated. You know exactly what to do. He clenched his jaw. She's the mother of my child, and I'm your mother. One who's been robbed, humiliated, and erased. You think choosing her means keeping your family. But she's already tearing it apart. She says if I back you on this, she's done. She was done the moment she decided I didn't belong in Alara's life. I paused. You'll lose me either way, Jasper. But only one path lets you keep your daughter with dignity. He stood in silence for a long time, his shoulders heavy with the weight of someone realizing that silence had never protected him. It had only delayed the truth. Give me time, he finally said. Time's what I ran out of. I handed him a copy of the court filing, and as he walked out the door, I knew the next step wouldn't be legal, it would be personal. 3 months passed. The court settlement came swiftly once Sabine's lawyer saw the full extent of the records. Full restitution, interest, legal fees, and a visitation schedule that gave me protected time with Alara regardless of Sabine's wishes. It was a quiet but complete unraveling. The divorce was finalized within weeks. Jasper got custody. Sabine got supervised visits and moved back to her mother's condo 2 towns over. I didn't celebrate, not loudly. I planted daffodils in the backyard instead and replaced the old swing Jasper used as a boy. Alara came over every other weekend. The first few visits were cautious, her eyes searching mine like I might vanish again. But tonight, we sat in lawn chairs side by side, the telescope between us angled toward a crisp spring sky. She adjusted the knob with both hands, tongue between her teeth in concentration. I see it, she whispered. Grandma, I see Saturn. I leaned closer. You do? Let me see. She stood to let me look. And for a moment, all I saw wasn't the planet, but the glint of her small fingers clutching the eyepiece, the same hands I once held, as she took her first steps across my kitchen tile. Jasper stood by the porch, watching quietly. He still struggled with his guilt, still hadn't found the words to say what needed saying, but he showed up. He helped clean my gutters last week. He replaced the bulbs in the hallway I couldn't reach. He asked how I was sleeping. It wasn't enough, but it was a beginning. After Alara went inside for hot cocoa, I sat on the swing and let the night settle. The house was warm behind me, lit by soft lamps and the hum of cartoons. My phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. Is this Mrs. Wills? The voice was tentative, middle-aged, trembling, just enough to be familiar. Yes, speaking. My daughter-in-law. I think she's doing the same thing to me. My son won't listen. I don't know what to do. I saw your story online. I stopped her gently. Take a breath, I said. Tell me what happened. I'm listening. And as she began, I opened the notebook again, turned to a fresh page and started to write. What would you do if love was used to bankrupt you? What would it take for you to stop being someone's silent ATM? And if your silence built someone else's fantasy, when would you finally speak?